We might be live in this very moment. Greetings, friends. This is Gemini Brett here with friend Andi, who's traveling currently in Dubai and has traveled all over the place, which makes her an amazing candidate for some astro map play. I'm currently collecting examples from world travelers like Andi for astromap and astrocartography local space classes that I teach regularly. So Andi, thank you so much for being willing to come and tour the world of your astro maps with me. I just want to maybe ask a few questions to set us up, but I would like to spend most of our time in the maps if that's okay. I know you from the Institute for Aliveness, and therefore, as one of the shining examples of my new mantra, which is make a loving instead of make a living, or make your loving your living, because I know this is true for you. And I know you have traveled and lived in many, many places in the world. I'm interested in the origin story for your school. Was there a particular place where the dream landed for you? I mean, I'm sure it's a culmination of so much study and so much love, but was there a place on Earth where it kind of landed in your dream
Wow.
space?
Ooh. Place on earth. Well, I mean, first of all, I'll say that I'm not making a living from it. This is an institute that's actually fully running as a nonprofit. I haven't taken any money, and the students
Wow.
that own the institute. So it's not necessarily that. This isn't what I do for a living or what I want to do. It's more of a dharma, something that I have no choice but have to do. I tried to kind of put it away for about 3 years. And when it came up and I could no longer ignore it, was mid 2019, and specifically the name, the Institute for Aliveness, came when I was in eastern Spain. I was off grid outside of a small village halfway between Valencia and someone else probably watching, some Spaniards cursing me. I don't know the other city right now. But you can find it on a map. But that's where the name came. And then the curriculum for the Institute came several years before. As I mentioned, I had to kind of shove it away, but it was when I was off grid in 40 Days of Silence in South Africa, about a half hour east of Cape Town. So those are two interesting locations. I don't know if they could speak to you. And I mean, I originally went to that off-grid location because of astrocartography.
Oh, because of astrocartography. So you followed a map to a specific place to be? Gotcha.
It's where I spent my Saturn return.
Cool. And you're in Dubai right now, so there's three places we can play. We seem to have a bit of a internet delay, Andi. You're frozen on my screen. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you
And
fine. Yeah. The Dubai internet, funny enough, I guess it's only good when you pay a lot of money.
I see. Yeah, I'm wondering if maybe we need to stop videos along the way. Well, let's just see how it goes. Let me share my screen. And so,
Okay.
I already know I
All
have
right.
your permission, but I'd ask you again, it's okay to share your chart with the whole
Yeah.
world.
Yeah. Hi, world. I'm
Okay.
me. I had a rough with
So,
the post. I said that very Leo rising.
so let's head maybe first to Africa. This map right now, and this is Astro Gold software. One of the reasons why I love the software for Astro Maps is it does two different techniques on the same map. There's a lot of things I can't do with it, but I can do in other ways, and maybe we'll go to other places if we want to get some more detail. I'm going to start with astrocartography lines, which are by far what most astrologers and students of astrology are more familiar with. And it just shows us places on the Earth where planets were either rising or reaching their height or resting in the west or rooting down below the ground in any moment, like a birth moment like this. So my eyes are in South Africa, and I see it's a Mars rising line. What was it in the map that encouraged you to go there?
Yeah, Mars rising for sure. It was that sense of wanting to find the warrior within.
Amazing. Did it work?
Yeah, I was training triathlon.
So you were training triathlon, but then this was also a 40-day meditation space?
Yeah, I was in silence for 40 days and training during that period.
Got you. So you were running the whole time. It's not like you were sitting still for 40 days.
Correct.
Cool. And did you feel that energy of Mars there?
Yes, for sure.
Did it show up in any ways that were not so favorable for your experience?
That's interesting. Not that I can remember, not that come to mind. If you have examples, maybe I can.
Well, yeah, so I think that's a really important thing about maps in general, and I'd rather like hear your story than me say anything. But I will just say when we click like interpretation buttons on the softwares, if you lack self-assertion, then this location is beneficial. However, dot dot dot. But I don't think it's only like if you lack self-assertion, if you want to use that self-assertion to train for a triathlon, for example, it's great for a Mars line. What the softwares don't do is look at what Mars is in our own natal chart, right? So we have Sagittarius Mars applying to Saturn. You said this was the time of a Saturn return, right? So that whole energy is going to be activated. There's much more to say about that. Like, how is Mars involved with career path or personal path on the chart, on and on and on. But I'd rather collect your stories again than project them. So that's cool to know that you followed astrology to a place for training. I think that's awesome. How'd you do in the triathlon?
Yeah, good. I mean, what happened actually, Brett, was that I was looking for a master, right? I had already kind of gone into silence, searching the world. I was thinking to go to Thailand and join a Kung Fu training. I was looking for a master. I wanted to willingly give my body and let them take it. And what happened was nothing really felt like it fit. And so based on these lines, I went to South Africa. Obviously, based on other things in my life, I had a fantastic place to stay, a friend to be my interpreter when I was in silence as needed, things like that. But I remember distinctly, I was on an apple orchard overlooking a dam where I would swim and I would bike and run around the apple orchard and the surrounding area every day. And I remember being at the edge of the water, the cold dam water, and what I discovered was this master within. And so even though I'm someone who has a tremendous amount of self-assertion anyway, Venus and Aries, there was this sense of, I remember saying in my head, 1, 2, 3, Andi, just fucking jump in. And I gave myself no choice.
Amazing.
And so it was that master within was who I discovered and who I was craving.
So the master in the chart can be seen in many places. I mean, one would be Saturn, authority figures, but typically we look to the ninth, right? For like training and teaching. Traditionally, the ninth was called the house of God. So if there's like a spiritual master, we often see it show up in the ninth. And amazingly, in the Leo rising design, which is so much about cultivating your own roaring flame. The ninth sign for Leo rising is Aries, right? And so it really does look like that. You are your master. You also, in your own nativity, have this really brilliant mutual reception, as you know, between Sagittarius Mars and Aries Jupiter, who's in your ninth, right? So that energy of like so many journeys to faraway lands, which is a ninth house theme as well, right? So our spiritual pilgrimages, like super linked in this grand fire trine of your Leo ascendant and Mars and Jupiter, right? So I think it would make even more sense for you than it would for others to head to a Mars line, as Mars traditionally is the ruler of the ninth house and has these really cool connections. And so that's like a really wonderful example. Thank you for sharing that. As to like why we need to treat planets differently on maps based upon different natal charts. Also, like particular timings in our lives. And the things I always ask clients is, if they're looking to move, for example, what are you moving away from? Or what are you moving towards? So we know what you were moving towards at this time. And I think it's a brilliant choice. It's a fun synchronicity to speak about this Mars-Jupiter trine in your chart, because I have a Jupiter line that goes right through Lesotho there, though I have not been. I have been to Spain, but not to the coast, which you were describing before. So did you say it was the eastern coast of Spain up here in the corner-ish?
Yes.
And this is where you got the, no, you're going to birth this school, whether you like it or not, mission?
Yes, more or less.
And so we see... I'm sorry, Andi, I interrupted you.
It's where the name came, yeah.
Got you. And aliveness, which of the 12 zodiac signs as an astrologer yourself, Andi, do you associate the word aliveness most with?
Scorpio.
With Scorpio, cool. Yeah, I dig that. I think another option would be Aries. For me, I would start Aries because aliveness feels like such a daytime quality. But yeah, and amazingly, we find the two signs traditionally associated with Mars. But this is a place where it's actually a Libra rising place. We can tell pretty easily on your chart because this is where Jupiter, who we know is in the sign of Aries, was setting. And your Jupiter is actually opposite a really powerful star that I know you know, a star called Spica, right? So Spica or Chitra is 24 degrees Libra. So basically where Jupiter was setting when you were born, which is right here on the east coast of Spain through Portugal, is also where Spica was rising, the shaft of wheat that the priestess holds. It's the star that most sidereal zodiacs are configured to in one way or another. So I think there's a lot of image there too, right? And that idea of Libra rising, as you said before, Venus, who we often refer to when we see Libra at the ascendant, is in Aries in your chart. So there's something about do your thing, Aries, but for the love of relations. That's a little bit of the Libra rising path, or you're not allowed to sit in silence for your life or whatever, that this is going to be involvement. This is a place on earth. I'm really interested. I think I have a thing set up here where I can just map the, like the sign cusps. So this will show me where, this is odd. Actually, something I think is glitchy, possibly. Oh, you know what? Maybe that's not a Jupiter rising line. I should cast a relocated chart. So, which is a really good point. Thank you. The maps, for me, they really should just bring our eyes to important places on Earth, right? So when I see this line, this has to be Jupiter setting. Weird. When I see like Jupiter setting, then I also want to cast a chart for a place. So you mentioned Valencia, and Andi, we're frozen again and probably in weird time, but can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly the whole time.
Okay, should I close my camera as well? I saw you did, I'm sure, for bandwidth.
No, you keep yours open as you wish.
Okay, well, just let me know if that's going to be a smarter move. So I'm going to go to Valencia, Spain. And I actually see that the software was right before. It just showed me where Taurus was rising. So basically this is or Scorpio is rising. So this place is going to be the late degrees of Libra rising, and then Scorpio starts rising. So in Valencia, it's actually Scorpio rising. And let's show that again. I'm going to do those sign cusps. So this is where it shifts between Scorpio and Libra. And so Valencia is on the Scorpio side of that line. Where were you when you got the push for or got the name for the Institute for Aliveness, Andi?
On the right side. So
So you were over
between
here,
Valencia. No,
somewhere
I think I was, yeah. Where that tip is, where it goes out, I was somewhere around there.
like this kind of
The tip
zone.
of middle tip, yeah.
Got you. So I was looking at the wrong coast. So on the east coast of Spain, as you had said, and for some reason I was looking west. Cool. So it's less Jupiter rising um, than the other side of the country. So let's dig the chart, right? And I love how you said Scorpio, right? That's how you feel into the Institute for Aliveness. I mean, amazingly, this is
I mean, I will say that the theme of our institute is Sagittarius. The pine tree logo is meant to be the Sagittarius, the arrow. And it's very much a vision quest, open Jupiter kind of environment, higher studies. But the reason that I would correlate aliveness to Scorpio is more because of Daniel Giamario's phrase, going to the edge of aliveness for aliveness' sake.
It's always a risky thing. Yeah, and Daniel Giamario, who I studied with as well at the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, is such a beautiful connection to and transmission of these sign archetypes. One thing that school does not employ, which most astrologies do, is the idea of, well, traditionally they're called domicile lords, or many people use this term rulers of signs now. I prefer the word guides. And interestingly, in a Scorpio rising place, traditionally, Mars would be the steersman of the chart, the so-called ruler of the ascending sign. So traditionally, Mars rules Scorpio. And it's interesting then to see that Sagittarius Mars as the steersman for this chart. But also just Scorpio, and this is probably something that you've looked at before, but I love how the name of aliveness came to you there in a place where the sign that you associate aliveness with was rising. So other games we can play, and this is just advice for folks who are looking at relocating maps, like, if we look at this map, many people would say, hey, go to that Jupiter line. And, you saw I couldn't even resist it, right? And Jupiter lines tend to be very benefic and bring opportunities and whatnot. And Jupiter's setting line it's the setting lines, because that seventh house tend to speak more for relationship experience, or sometimes that planetary energy will come alive in our connections with others, or, it might be a place where people see Jupiter in you, right? So one of the great questions of charts, of maps, is like, well, how far from a line does the line influence? This would be Jupiter in the sixth house, and this map, if you look at the bottom in the middle, will kind of show us in miles and kilometers how far away. So it's 430. Some go 500, some go 700. Some of us, myself included, are more interested in places that are on the west side of a line, because it places the planet in the angular house considered instead of the sixth. But as you said before, this is Dharma, right? I'll feel like it still applies to make a loving. I'm not sure, that's up to you. But that's very much sixth house stuff, right? You're not going to, I don't know. I love how you're just like, there were these times in your story where you're pushed to do this thing despite some resistances you might have. I'm intrigued also that this place on Earth was not only nighttime, right? So the sun is below the horizon, but every visible planet is. And I got lost in the story, but I heard this is a place where you were off grid, but is this a place where you were also in silence, or that was only in the Africa story?
Only in the Africa story.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, an interesting consideration too in your chart, because it has that bowl shape, right? Is really set up for, well, half of the Earth, not half, but many places of the Earth will have all the planets above the horizon, which tends to be more public. And then many places on the Earth, like Spain here, will have all the planets below the horizon, which tends to be more about our private life. I've seen as a practitioner that like very, I don't know, general statement sometimes work and sometimes not. And it's something I do look at in relocating charts. Like if you want to get off the grid, for example, like having all the planets below is genius, because it's just a little bit less entangled. All right, so other things to look for in any location are aspects to the relocated angles. And then that really depends on the aspect sets you use. So I love in these softwares, we can just kind of snap to these grids pretty quickly. And I'll look at planets that are aspecting the relocated angles. So these are the angles in Valencia, Spain in the moment of your birth. And this one like jumped out of the screen. I don't work with quincunxes too much personally, but it is cool to see how strong that connection is between Venus at 141 and this, Valencia ascendant at 1 Scorpio. And further south on the coast, that's going to change a little bit, not too much. Yeah. So, and the story of the quincunx is interesting here because we also have Neptune quincunx the midheaven. Another bit I'm wondering about is the Institute for Aliveness a family for you?
It's a family for the people who are there. For me, it feels like something I've birthed. So in that sense of like offspring or generations down, or I mean, not down directionally, but like it's kind of torchbearers. I'm passing on a torch of sorts, and these will be the people that will carry it forward.
Beautiful. Yeah, the birthing would typically be fifth, but the reason why I asked about family, and there's some fourthness in that transmission too, is the sun is the guide of Leo, which is the midheaven in that place for you. Also, just wondering sorry, go ahead.
Becomes a family for the people who join it because the worldview shifts so greatly that it feels, wow, we are just seeing differently than everyone around us. And yet we have this family here. And people often say that where other people see like us because of what we've been trained to see in the human experience.
Yeah, you can really feel that strength of your Aquarius light in that statement, right? And I think sometimes we're so connected with others that have been on a similar initiatory path, which is something your school offers, right? Because we just develop a completely different language. Yeah, one of the reasons why I love training astrologers is because I have more people I can share these amazing thoughts and contemplations with, and something we need that language bridge. So there's something about that Aquarius Mercury Cazimi in your chart, right? And because the sun is representing the 10th here, Mercury's going to get in on that since they are in a sense one when you were born. Such a cool aspect group. All right, well, I want to go back to the map and put a different technique on the page as well while we're looking at these two places. So these are local space lines. Well, if you were born in Valencia. So let me get back to your birthplace too. But as long as we're here, I might as well just say a quick word about what this technique is. This one, unlike astrocartography lines that show us where planets were angular.
You're still showing the chart, I think. Yeah, there we go. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, we've got a good delay going. It's like Earth and Mars. So local space lines, they aren't about relocated charts. They won't show us bring us to places on the Earth where planets were at the angles in a moment. That's astrocartography. Local spaceline, which was visioned forth by Michael Erlewine, he called vulgar astrology. And I love it. They're super powerful. Unlike astrocartography lines, which are going to be the same for, in this case, Valencia, Spain, or Columbus, Ohio, where you were born, right? So I go back to Columbus, and these aren't going to change at all because this is just where planets were rising, reaching, resting, and rooting in the moment of your birth. But local space lines are completely based upon a local phenomena. So if I time machined back and held you up to Venus here, who was just shining bright in the west when you were born, I would be holding you in this direction of this Venus line, this blue line that goes down to Mexico. And while we're there, Andi, have you had experiences in the United States along that blue line? Let me zoom in here. Have you followed this blue Venus line at all down through Kentucky and into Texas and down to Mexico? So Austin is a place I notice on that line.
I spent 6 weeks last year in Austin, and it was very much about relationship, and that sense of like surrender into relationship and that essence of making a home. In terms of the other states, not so much.
Yeah, so these are like, again, just if I held you up to Venus in the west, or if I held you up to Jupiter. The other ones being below ground, I'd have to be super psychic or know a whole bunch of things about astronomy. I'm training in both. You know, if I wanted to hold you in the direction of Mars, who is down below the ground in the northwest, that's going over here towards southern Oregon. And we get like Uranus right through Lake Tahoe, etc. But it's interesting to hear that Austin was a place that you went and spent some time and had that relational focus, because of course Venus is often associated as a planet of relationship. Probably if I click that button, that's what we're going to hear. Love and romance are highlighted along this line. And we can work with the local space and the astrocartography lines together just to see if there were any planets rising, reaching, or resting, rooting around there. The closest is this Jupiter at the midheaven line. And so if we were in Albuquerque, Jupiter would be in the 10th house side of the midheaven. Over here in Austin, which is still pretty close to that line, if we cast a relocated chart, we're going to see Jupiter in the 9th house. I'm going to leave that there for now, and let's travel these local space lines. These can get overwhelming. And we'll find that that Venus line too goes down through Mexico and then into the great blue ocean, comes to the other side of the flat earth, right south of New Zealand. Do you have any stories in New Zealand, Andi?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Great love story from New Zealand. And it's also a place that I'm looking to buy a farm.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, I love that. So, by the way, I just added astrocartography line. So this is Jupiter rising, telling us it's basically halfway around the world from Spain, where Jupiter is setting when you were born. Jupiter rising lines have one of the best raps in the astrocartography circles. No doubt about it. We know if Jupiter's rising, Aries is rising for you. And while Venus isn't rising, that's happening over here in Australia, kind of in right between Melbourne and Adelaide. But this is this Venus local space line, which, as we saw, heads out of your birthplace in Columbus, Ohio, down through Austin, goes through Mexico. And while these just look like curves on the flat map on the globe, they're all actually great circles that divide the globe in half. And so this is coming back through the southern tip of New Zealand. All these local space lines will reconverge at your antipode or antipode, the opposite side of the globe from your birthplace, and then coming back up. And we see, along the Spanish-French border here, so not too far away from where we were before, but there's a line that's much closer, and it's also one that favors New Zealand. And this is the nodal line, right? So it'd be I don't know that I'd be holding you up to anything if I held you up to the North Node, since there's not a body there, right? But it's a very important place in space, as we know, where from Earth's point of view, in this case, the path of the moon crosses the ecliptic, or the path of the sun, from the south to the north. Many associate it with destiny, as you well know, and the forward direction in that. I mean, interestingly, if I'm facing the north node, that means the back of my heart is facing the south node because they're always exactly opposite one another. So the nodal lines in local space, they're always just shown north node, south node. And they tend to be places of significant destiny. So let's start here because we know this was a very important place of significant destiny for you. Again, like we don't have any indication of this in an astrocartography or in a relocated chart. This is like a whole different thing. But it is interesting to see how close you were to that nodal line. And Lilith is another moon, Earth moon thing, right? So like between Lilith, this is the true black moon Lilith calculation, and the nodes where you kind of received the name for the institute. Back down to Africa, this is pretty amazing, right? Not only do we have that Mars astrocartography line where Mars was rising, that's this one sweeping down from, I don't know, towards the west. But it's some call this a biparan, which is, I don't know, it's a stretch of a term, but regardless, where you have astrocartography lines, which is that Mars line, and local space lines crossing, right? And so you went right there to train for a triathlon, which is a very Martian thing. I kind of want to pursue apple orchard and like what that means in the chart. But anyway, let's look to New Zealand. I think it's a wonderful place for you to follow that dream and to start your own orchard or whatever it may be. Like these nodal lines are amazing. Jupiter rising, super cool. You know, if you were deciding between the North Island and the Southern Island, I would go south. But either way, you're close enough for all of this stuff to really experience the blessings of those lines. It looks really good. There's another thing, and I don't think I have time right now, but where you can also look at how the maps shift with time as we do with our own natal charts. You can look at transits, you can look at progressions. There's other ways to play. And there's all sorts of other things like midpoints. But let's go back in time a bit. So you're in Dubai right now, where there's all sorts of happenings on your maps.
Are there?
This is where Jupiter direction. So this is a Jupiter astrocartography or local space line, the gray one, very close to Dubai. That same Mars rising energy that goes to Africa, right? That's this pink line here. Let me get this pink line, right? Was also favoring Dubai when you were born. And generally speaking, although I'm not going to speak too much technically, but there's a difference between what we call zodiacal lines and inmundo lines. For Mars, for you, not at all. Which means that Mars was on the ecliptic when you were born. Mars was at one of his nodes. If you want to just see that quickly. So Mars is at 2217 Sag when you're born. AstroGold just added these. And look at, Mars's south node in the moment of your birth was 2229 Sag. So, like basically Mars was exactly on the ecliptic plane. This is his latitude. I mean, it's like literally 0. That's super cool. And it's a long story, but a quick thing to say, because we can't leave that without saying something, is it makes your Martian energy, I think, well, on one level, I like to think of the ecliptic where the sun lives. I call it the circle of spirit. But I also think that it connects it a little bit more into like the world mission. And so Sagittarius Mars might climb that mountain and, not look back, right? But there's something where this Siva for Mars is really connected also into service for the world. I kind of look at those crossing points as ways that we participate with the greater whole, not necessarily like the Sagittarian way where we want to be on the vision quest. I mean, Saturn seems to have a lot to do with this in the moment of your birth and that connection of Mars and Saturn in that way too. But that's pretty amazing. Like it is very rare when I push these buttons, like look at any other line. And when I push this button, they're going to move a bit. But Mars just doesn't move at all. That's because he's right on the ecliptic. So I can see then that in Dubai, Mars is going to be right on the 6th house side of a relocated chart. And that's always true for locations that are to the east of an astrocartography line. They'll put them in the cadent houses, where to the west, so if you're over in like Riyadh, for example, Mars is going to be in the 7th house. Either way, we know it's a Gemini rising place for you. Was an interesting place to be with Mercury just stationed retrograde in that sign of Gemini at this moment. Do you feel any, besides a challenging internet connection, do you feel any Gemini rising nature in Dubai? Is it a place where you feel that Aquarius, Mercury, Cazimi of your nativity come alive?
Yes, that last part for sure. It's big because the last time I was here, I was actually pitching a project to one of the royal families, and I'm intending to pitch to a different royal family this time I'm here. So that aspect of communication, but both are in some kind of data collection element, and both in relation to health. And I heard you say 6th house.
Yeah, let's look at a relocated chart for Dubai. So this is something I always recommend when people are playing with maps. Like, what the map showed us is this, right? The map showed us that Mars was rising there in Dubai when you were born. And I said 6th house, but I should have said 12th because it's a rising line. And rising lines, of course, mean ascendant. In the cadent house at the ascendant is the 12th, not the 6th. So bad astrologer. A thing that I like here is not only Mars at the angle, but it's also your Mars-Jupiter mutual reception, right, gets connected in this very strong way. So we have Jupiter also trining the ascendant. We have your Sun and Mercury who live at their midpoint, sextile the ascendant. Chiron is setting, which I'm sure did show up in this map. That's this green line here. So what I said about Mars in the 6th actually does apply to Chiron. And then these are both Saturn. These are rising lines for both Saturn and Uranus. So that's going to place them in the 1st house. So it's definitely a place where there's a lot of strength. I mean, again, interestingly, this other place where we have part of your story in Africa is connected there. And a difference in this particular place in Dubai from Africa, which you're not seeing so much on this map, one we have is the South Node. This is where the North Node was at the IC when you were born, or the South Node is at the MC. So we'll see the South Node in the 9th here. I'm going to get back to that because it's a really important part of the chart. But a thing that was happening in Dubai that was not happening in Africa also was this Jupiter local space line. And I'm in Valencia, Spain. Hold on a second. I mean, were you living in Valencia and then traveling to Dubai? I actually would look at the local space lines from Valencia as well. But I always start with the birth chart anywhere. And here we can see how close that Jupiter line is to Dubai. So Jupiter in general, you push that button and it's going to say all good things. Jupiter in Aries, different story, but Jupiter in Aries in mutual reception with Mars applying from Sagittarius in that powerful fire trine, which also connects to your Leo ascendant and your nativity. That looks brilliant. I mean, it certainly seems that this is a place where your pitch is going to be heard, probably received, and you will receive benefits. I look forward to hearing the news about that. So that is just to point out, like, it's helpful, I think, to bring in these local space lines. You see, it's a very different story in Africa. Let me take the local space lines in and out. So while we have Mars rising, in both Dubai and South Africa near Cape Town. And Saturn and Uranus not far away, and Chiron setting. In Dubai, we get some other stories, by the way. One we didn't look at. This is Venus at the IC. So that's not so close to Africa, but very close to Dubai, right? You can see that in the chart here. Venus at the IC. But another thing that differentiates these two places where Mars was rising when you were born is this Jupiter local space line. Whereas in Africa, we saw it's the Mars local space line crossing the Mars rising. That's definitely much more triathlon style, right? And there's a bunch of local space lines there. So anyway, this looks favorable. Again, I look forward to hearing the news. And before I leave Dubai, I just want to share this. Astrologers often teach that the midheaven is the highest part of the chart, which is wrong. It's not typically a lie, usually just we don't know. The highest part of the chart is always square the ascendant. So sadly, these don't show up in astro maps. You can at astro.com at their Astro Click Travel, which is their astrocartography map. They have a button that you can click, which is called Disharmonious Aspects. But I think this is anything but disharmonious. They're saying that because it's a square. But when we have planets squaring the ascendant, it means they are literally at the high point and the low points of the chart. The traditional term is boring. It's called nonagesimal, which just means 90 degrees. But this is a huge place, and it's not going to show up on either of these mapping techniques for the nodes for you. So there's really deep, in that sense, soul connection as well. So anyway, I wish you great luck with your pitch. It seems to me from the maps that it's going to go well. And when I see that, by the way, right, like that's your map for a lifetime. It's your birth chart. The nodes are very much connected into this grand cross with Mars and Chiron when you're born. It's interesting. It becomes angular, right, when Mars and Chiron come down to the horizon. But there'll be times in your life when planets are transiting those points, like maybe Neptune and Mars at the node, right, which is happening right now. So sometimes we're called to these places on Earth also when the natal chart is being inspired by transiting planets or the many, many techniques we use. So we see that's happening with Saturn at Sun and Mercury right now. The nodes are transiting your moon right now, maybe particularly interesting in this moment in which we are recording because this is a total lunar eclipse that's aligning pretty strongly to your moon in Scorpio. Well, we have Mars and Neptune here. So will you be in Dubai for the eclipse on Monday? Uh-oh, and it sounds like our connection was just eclipsed. Oh, I think I hear you now. Yeah. Are we back, Andi? Uh-oh.
Yes.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I'm here.
I think it's an amazing place to be, and also we could look to moon lines right now. This being one of them. So moon was rising when you were born in Istanbul. Also down through Central Africa. Not so much in the Dubai zone, up through Russia here. Let me go a little bit lower too. We can travel without moving, which I think is really important. And especially as many places as you've been, whether you're actually carrying stones from Africa with you, you carry, the loving minerals of your memories. So, when planets are activated, sometimes it's amazingly uncanny. I imagine you've experienced that we will have an experience with somebody from one of these places where that planet kind of shined in the moment of our birth. And given how global you've been, I would say, during this lunar eclipse, especially since it is so close to your natal moon, tuning into like this place. This is the moon rising line that I'm tracing with a gigantic circle right now. So these places, or this is moon setting, which is pretty oceanic. Does come here through Siberia and then becomes the moon rising. This is moon at the midheaven, which gets pretty close to Bali, where I believe you lived for some time, right? Not too close. And then there's also moon at the IC, which is pretty close to home, right? And that one goes down through Florida. So those are all places, these are ways where we can expand our intentions, meditations, ritual, whatever it wants to be for you during powerful astronomical events like an eclipse. We can do them in time, right? We can do them in space. We can do them in the chart, right? Contemplating on 11th house or 12th sign themes or whatever it may be. But we can also do them on maps. And so it's just a thing I would recommend with this powerful eclipse aligning, that you can kind of call on the powers of some of your experiences on those moon line places. Actually want to show, I'm just going to show the sun and the moon so we can filter out a bunch of that stuff. Are there any stories that you have on these lines that you see on the screen now?
Nothing. Yeah, I mean, I lived in Ecuador for a period during university. And that time in Quito was very potent. It was my second language, and now I speak many. But in learning that second language, there was a certain essence of mastery of like, I can really do this. I was studying Spanish literature in Spanish, and a sense of empowerment that came with it. In Quito as well, I got in a street fight. I had just come back from Colombia, and I wasn't willing to stand for the escalating violence that was happening there in 2008. And so some girls, some little gringas who were being loud and giggling with their backpacks, they were getting robbed, and I just said, not on my watch. And I started yelling, "Déjanlas," to the guys, like, leave them alone. And eventually kind of the scene broke up because I disturbed it, but not before a huge man came over and started kind of picking a fight with me. I kneed him in the crotch. He kicked me and ran off. And so those are some memorable Quito moments. Quito, Ecuador.
Some serious Mars there. I mean, so it's cool to see, like, when we were just looking at your natal chart with the sun and the moon, who, as you of course well know, were square when you were born. You need to get to your natal chart. That square allows, and it's not only squares, but that square allows them to be angular, right, in places. And that's like something very powerful about Ecuador. Have you spent time in Panama as well, Andi?
Just been through. I haven't spent time there.
What about Cuba?
Yeah, I love Cuba. It's one of my favorite countries. I've only been there for 2 weeks, but I intend to go back. Was just talking about it yesterday.
Cool. Yeah, it's like, so again, like, what is an eclipse but a very special conjunction or opposition of the moon and the sun? This is a place where the square of your Aquarius sun and Scorpio moon in your chart is like most powerfully enacted. We should go to Cuba and just have a look at that. It's pretty close to Havana, actually, right? So this is like literally in the moment of your birth, the moon was at the IC, and the sun was setting simultaneously. And that's like, it's pretty close in your birthplace here in Columbus, Ohio. It's more close in Florida, especially on the west coast of Florida, Panama, and then it's part of the Ecuador story. But I love that you went there to study. So let me get this Ecuador chart up again. Right, which tends to be a ninth house theme. And oftentimes I'll see, like my niece right now is choosing between colleges. And so I'll look at like ninth house and relocated charts, maps, how it's getting activated now. And often, that will really inspire where somebody's traveling or where somebody's going to study. Of course, where the sun does anything for you, Mercury does too, because they are basically one, that Cazimi, Mercury in the heart of it. And as I say that, however, it doesn't mean that Mercury and the sun are going to be exact. If I move this to in zodiacal calculations, that's just how far apart they are in your chart. But Mercury, unlike Mars, was not right on the ecliptic plane. He's off a bit. So there is this place that's very close to Panama, as you can see, where they were actually co-setting. And we call that a Paran. We call this a Paran as well, where the moon was at the IC in the same moment that the sun was setting. So these crossings of astrocartography lines tend to be super powerful. Anyway, I love that Ecuador, like that story led with, this was a place where I met my second language, right? And now you speak many of them. So we really hear the strength of Mercury at the angle there, no doubt. I love Jupiter here, so close to the ninth house cusp. Now that's going to depend on house system. This is a porphyry chart, but also in the ninth sign, which is true in your own natal design. And we see that international travel and spiritual travel, I think, has been a very important part of what you've shared here, and also some of what I know about you that you have not yet shared. And Jupiter in Aries in the ninth really speaks about that, going to find your own spirit in faraway lands. I think the story of you learning that it's the inner master that you were meant to meet is really well kind of expressed there. But we do see Mars play here in a few ways. One, from a traditional point of view, Mars represents the fourth. So the land itself will kind of have that Martian energy. But we have a pretty strong trine from Mars to the ascendant. And another way we can get there, even if that wasn't shown, is that Mars and your sun have a very strong connection. And in Leo rising places, that means Mars is going to participate more, according to some paradigms of the cosmic kung fu. So it's interesting to hear that there was that kind of Martian experience, like street fight, right? But street fight over ideals, over truth. Like you can hear that Sagittarius nature of Mars in the street fight in a foreign land. It'd be intriguing to check the transits at the same time, but I don't want to do that. What I want to do here is go also to Havana, because we see like these very similar lines. It's not so far away, of course, but one of the ways where we will see distinction between the two places, Havana, as we saw on the map, is like right at sunset and right at moon at the IC. A little further from that crossing that I thought. But there's also, I should say this, like this is what the chart, the relocated chart shows. The moon is at the IC in Miami, but the moon was not right on the ecliptic. And this is where the moon was actually anti-culminating when you were born, more through Orlando and closer to Havana. So the maps, they direct our gaze to relocated charts, but they also do something a little bit different too. And so in Havana, the ascendant is 21 Leo. The sun is even more strongly configured. That's true as well for Mercury. But it's a pretty similar map, right? So looking at how our experiences shift from one place to another when the charts are so similar. Like even your nativity where we are now in Columbus, right? It's pretty similar. The moon's at the IC, Mercury and Sun are at the descendant, but it's nighttime. Whereas in Havana and Quito, it was just the end of daytime. The sun was up above in the seventh. And traditionally, that completely changes the rules in amazing ways. I think I need to leave that there for now. So anyway, I love that in these like strong moon sun places, I don't know that Quito would have come up if we weren't having this conversation right now, but that Havana's like been in your dream space right now, because with an eclipse happening, we could look to places for not only moon on the earth when you were born, but also moon sun. And, again, they can send representatives, they can send human beings, but they can also send visions and dreams. And it makes a lot of sense. And that being said, I would trust that. Not that you aren't anyway. All right, let's head to like one or two more places. What's a crazy story you don't mind sharing publicly that might express itself on a map? Crazy story in a faraway land.
There's so many, Brett. I've been to more than 100 countries.
Wow.
Should we follow the lines or follow the stories?
Whichever you want to do. Let me put the map on here. I'm going to like put on the local space lines too. So we're looking at a lot. And by the way, I would add so many other lines if this software let me, and I do just kind of theoretically or philosophically anyway. But this is probably enough. The map is covered. Anything like jumping off the screen at you? And tell me if you'd like me to zoom in anywhere.
We can discuss the Portugal lines because that's strong. I know we talked about that with Spain.
Jupiter is much closer though, right? So like if you were just deciding between Spain and Portugal, astrocartographically, I would go Portugal. I'd like get you over towards that Jupiter line and that Spica rising and Libra rising chart. There's one place that's jumping off at me, and I just have to ask you, have you been here in Central Africa?
I haven't.
Yeah, so when the stars align, it feels like a pretty cool space. It's where it was midnight. This is the midnight line, this vertical golden, and for you purple because that's the Mercury cazimi. It's where the sun is at the IC. So not so far away in Cape Town. The sun is just on the third house side. But looking at how they cross, this must be a moon moon. Oh, right. So this is moon rising and the sun at the IC. So it's kind of a different version of that Paran than what we saw in Cuba with a sun setting and moon at the IC. So there's just a lot that kind of jumps off the screen. Okay, so Portugal. What else? Because, yeah, we were over there in Spain. What about in this zone?
So two places. Yeah, two places that I know are quite strong are Amsterdam and Mumbai.
Yeah, so Amsterdam's fascinating too, right? Because this brings in a really important case. It is Pluto at the midheaven. I was going to say, well, there aren't lines there, but that's a big deal. Now, this I wanted to show. That's not Pluto
it is where
it's actually Pluto rising. And we're not going to see that. Notice that line just disappeared. We're not going to see that in a relocated chart for Amsterdam. We will see that the sun and Mercury are in the fourth. But when I click this in Mundo line, this shows me this is actually where Pluto is actually rising in the moment of your birth. So in a relocated chart, I would have to go over here to like Warsaw or Vatican, which is an interesting place, to get Pluto at the ascendant in the chart. But when you were born, Pluto was very, very far north of the ecliptic plane. And in the northern hemisphere, that means Pluto is going to rise well before the degree of the zodiac that Pluto projects to. So did you have any Plutonic experiences in Amsterdam?
what I said before was it was where I decided to leave my career. I had been running this health wellness career. I even had set up my apartment to have fasting retreats at my apartment in 2017. And halfway through the second one, I said, what am I doing? I can't do this. I actually like changed the course of the retreat to say, this is over. That sense of like death, of letting go was very strong midhaven.
Genius. I do want to cast a relocated chart for Amsterdam as well. Let me do that. Do I?
And I mean, I love Amsterdam undescribably as well. It feels a place of liberation for me. And I don't know if that's Scorpio moon stuff, really comfortable in the Plutonian atmosphere of death and rebirth. And it's this cleansing that kind of happens every time in this realignment. But for not having more lines than that, it's a place that sings my heart song.
It's cool to hear. Yeah. And that kind of composting of the old into something new can feel very Plutonic. Like a lot of the Pluto stories that we hear from astrocartographers, I resisted for a long time, but I actually have some of them on my Pluto lines. I just want to show you the chart. So we don't see like Pluto at the ascendant, which is what that line's showing. But if we get to the nerd list here, this will show us that Pluto's altitude is negative 37 minutes. Like he's right at the ascent. He's right about to rise at negative altitude. Is like literally just a little bit below the ground. So in a way, this like activates Pluto in the first more than it looks like here. And it's cool that astrocartography maps will show us that. I just wanted to see if there were other strong alignments. Like one thing I like here is Venus is trining the top of the chart, which I haven't yet been able to convince any of the map programmers to show me. But it's like, I'm always looking at the cusp of the equal sign 10th because it's the highest part of the chart, and then aspects from planets to those also. And then I'm also really interested in, and this isn't showing them, but so-called harmonic aspects to the relocated angles. So, and especially with this one story that you shared, it's a very midheaven-y story, right? So are things happening there? These are all undeciles or 11th harmonic aspects to the relocated midheaven. I don't think we want to get into that right now. But this one intrigues me. So this is Mars septile, the relocated ascendant, and it's really strong. The way these grids work is it tells me that it's 0 degrees and 10 arc minutes from a perfect septile, and the A means it's applying, it's like about to happen. So harder to see septiles on a chart unless we like bring in the lines, but basically, and for me it's easier to say it without all that stuff there, it's 51 and a half-ish degrees, right? So if I add 51 to the first degree of Scorpio, I get 22 Sag. And I think that the septiles really want us to go out of the box. They like, the reason why and I'm not the first, say that about the sevenths of a circle is you actually cannot divide a circle into sevens or 11s. Andy, we're frozen, but we seem unfrozen again. So I think like holding fasting retreats in your apartment already sounds pretty out of the box, but it maybe wasn't out enough, or you had to break away from that. What are some of the, like, you said that Amsterdam really sings to your heart. Like, what are some of the, how would you say that astrologically in your language? Like, are there different planets that really seem to be speaking through you and to you in Amsterdam?
That's really interesting. I mean, there's a sense of freedom. That's all if it's Leo astrologically, there's this sense of, I did teach there. I feel very in my element there. It feels just like a heart place. Like I feel happy. I feel that sense of Leo joyfulness and the ability to make it up as I go along, and I feel fulfilled. And yeah, that's really how it feels in Amsterdam.
It's sounds to me like it's not a place where you're completely internal or completely private or like, you know, not out in the public eye. And I just want to share that because, as I said before, like, I don't always see that delineation we hear about when all the planets are below the horizon speaks in that way. Yeah, the Leo joy, I love hearing. There's a lot of maybe Venus in that expression too, and Sun in that expression. Yeah, and I think it's worth playing with so-called minor aspects when we relocate to places. And let's also see if there's any local space lines. So we do get Jupiter pretty close by, like not nearly as close as he is in Dubai. That's this gray line I'm following here. I mean, it's almost right to Dubai, your Jupiter local space line. And again, I think that bodes really well for your mission you're on in this moment. Have you been to Poland?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just kind of following this Jupiter line. Copenhagen is like extremely interesting. It's very close to that Jupiter line.
Similar, I've only been once, but similar feelings to Amsterdam with that sense of joy and love. Very much love it. Something interesting for you might be that about a year ago, I was trying to get Polish citizenship by Ancestry, and kind of reinstigated that this year, but I'm looking now to see if it's easier to do in Hungary. So those are, I don't know how that would show up on a map.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So in Hungary, this would work through Ancestry as well?
I have ancestors from both places, so it's just a matter of which system's easier and getting the papers that I need and the proof.
Yeah, like if you were just asking me in the map which one would you go for, I might suggest Poland because of that Jupiter line. It sounds like that's not playing in that way. I mean, I think so much of that, like in astrology, well, in life, we have to get to the actual question, right? So it's like, hey, I want dual citizenship. Why? You know what I'm saying? And part of that I imagine is liberation and freedom. I'm projecting, but you know, that's like perhaps seen in these in Aquarius lines. And we often find in like nodes, sun, moon, strong connections to ancestry and family. Another way we could go there is looking at the quote unquote rulers of the 4th and the 10th houses in the natal chart, and on and on and on. Some look at Saturn in that regard, but the lines that we do see that are close, this is the Jupiter local space line, and then this is Sun at the IC. Some astrocartographers, there's like this thing of people saying they want to retire where the Sun is at the IC. So Jim Lewis, who in many ways is kind of like the father of astrocartography, he called the Sun at the midheaven line the fame line. And for you, that's Hawaii and Alaska. I mean, even more so. Well, yeah, like Kauai more than Big Island. And is this is Fiji right here, yeah? Or no, this is Fiji. Whatever that is that Samoa? Anyway, these islands become super interesting, and I don't want to get us lost, but the Sun at the midheaven, many often see as like a very kind of just productive, everybody sees you in your light, like awesome career space. Again, Jim Lewis called it the fame line, where the Sun at the IC should go the other way, where we can kind of like get out of the public eye and chill out a little bit. You know, it's like literally midnight. So those lines are pretty close to both. Poland actually goes through Poland and near Hungary as well. As you can see, they pass through Austria and Czech. And it's cool to hear that you have roots there. I call the IC the roots. But the Sun, which can speak for lineage in its own fascinating ways, but also in its Aquarian nature, that dual citizenship should offer more freedom and liberation and ability to move around. And certainly Mercury Cazimi would want that, I'm sure. Well, yeah, I guess one more question I'll ask. I wish we could go to the 100 countries you've been to. I have some really cool examples to share out of this, and I'm very much appreciative of your time. Thank you so much, Andi. I'm wondering if you have Hawaii stories. So again, in astrocartography, we see this is in the moment of your birth where the sun was at the midheaven. Mars is setting. So we're going to find that Sagittarius Mars in the 7th house. The Aquarius Sun and Mercury are going to be in the 9th house. So it's a Gemini rising place with the Aquarius beings here in the 9th side. And then the local space lines are interesting. We have Neptune going right to Big Island and more through Mauna Kea than through the volcano, although, you know, pretty much right there, right through the middle of the island. And then up towards Kauai, which is as close as you're going to get to the sun line, it's more Uranian. I have to imagine you have Hawaii experiences. Does any of that planetary energy speak to your experiences there?
Yeah. So Hawaii, funny enough, and I don't know why, but I traveled the whole world before being to Hawaii. And I finally went there because my best friend moved there. So now I've been 3 times to visit, twice to the Big Island, 3 times to Maui, 1 time to Kauai, 2 or more times to Oahu. And I actually spent 3 months of COVID on all 4 islands. And yeah, Big Island is always that sense of dreaminess. I mean, one could say because the cell phone service there is quite disconnected, but it is like this lackadaisical, it feels like nowhere, no man's land. And then Kauai, I was living in a van for 2 weeks on my own. I went on an epic hike, but it felt like there was a detachment in Kauai is the best way that I can describe it, but it was a place that I could see going if I had friends or community. And I do intend to go back. Yeah.
So a thing that this map does is, thanks for sharing all that. I mean, we could hear the Neptune. I think we could hear the Uranus, especially in that word detachment. You can do midpoints as well. So the Oahu is going to be at this like Neptune Saturn midpoint, which is especially interesting, depending on, your astrological approach, but with Neptune in Capricorn, like we want to connect it with Saturn. They are already in your chart, if I remember right. Oh, I was wrong. I thought they were Antisha, but that's not true. But your Neptune and your Mars have Antisha, which is a whole other story. But one way we can connect planets, that aren't right with one another is through midpoints. So like I'm fascinated by the midpoint of your Mars Neptune, for example, but that's not happening here. But like Mars or Saturn and Neptune will go through one of the islands. Saturn or Uranus and Neptune will go through another island. So as you're playing with maps, I'd check some of that out. Do you know where this is? I kind of need to see.
Yeah, show me New Zealand and I'll be able to say. I mean, some magical place that is there in the middle, but more south is Easter Island, which was one of my favorite places on earth. I never felt such deep sense of like magical nowhereness, which would be Neptune with something else maybe.
So Easter Island is here, right? Or is that Galapagos?
No, that's Galapagos there below it. So Easter Island's off the coast of Chile. It's a 5-hour flight straight out.
This?
I can't see anything there.
There's like a tiny little dot. Let's go here. This is a nice thing. I'm not going to take the time right now, but about the astro.com maps is you just get such great resolution. I mean, you can tune into like a house. Yeah, so that Eastern Island zone, I think it's this, there's a little dot. Yeah, I just had to move it to make sure it wasn't just a speck of something on my screen. But right in the middle of that circle, there's a tiny little dot. That's Easter Island. So this is Neptune's setting when you were born, right? Therefore, we know it's a Cancer rising place. That place is your Scorpio moon, which I'm particularly interested in a Cancer rising chart in the fifth of passion, romance, and risks. Neptune setting in a way is like the relationship to the dream, right? There's something about Easter Island where I've been in my visions and books, but not personally yet, about those gigantic ancient heads and the ancient language and right. There's actually a planet that was named after, from what I understand in the ancient culture there, like the vision of the one, which is called Maki Maki. And I'm wondering, let's see, I can put Maki Maki on this chart. I just want to do it because that would be mind-blowing if Maki Maki goes there for you.
I think you might enjoy it as well, Brett, that I went to Easter Island distinctly for the spring equinox directly after the night sky course in Arizona with Daniel.
Awesome.
And I went for the...
And had you been planning to go there before you did night sky work with Daniel, or was it inspired at that work?
Very inspired by that work.
Cool. You're an amazing example of following the vision. This is where Maki Maki was rising when you were born. Wouldn't it be cool? Oh no, that's a Maki Maki local space line. Anyway, I'm not going to follow Maki Maki lines. So it'd be super cool if that was actually going to Arizona. Did you do the night sky training with Daniel in Arizona, or where was it?
Yes, in Arizona.
Right. So in Arizona, when you were born, and this is where the lineage of your astrological approach and where we know one another through, like that's a Mercury local space line for you, by the way, which just makes a ton of sense. I mean, Mercury is astrology's guide. It's the one that brought us there, and that Aquarius retrograde Mercury Cazimi in your chart. I mean, you can see how close it is to that southern Arizona spot where Daniel was living then. An interesting thing to do is if you relocate. So let's go to, is it Sahuarita, Arizona, where you went?
Don't know.
Sedona? I think it was south of Tucson, yeah? I'm going to put in Tucson.
Yes.
We're having our internet challenges again. Let's go to Tucson. It'll be close enough for this experiment. So this is your Tucson rising chart, and again, we don't get that image of a local space line. Like it's not an astrocartography thing. We do see it's the last degree of Cancer rising, moon in the whole sign fifth. Jupiter's aligning to that ascendant a bit. They got a really strong Mars trine to the midheaven, Mercury trining the midheaven, the sun or sextile the midheaven. That's how those show up in your relocated chart. But one reason why I wanted to do this is I was just interested in seeing if the relocated local space lines point to Easter Island. And not really. So Jupiter's generally going down here. Jupiter's heading, well, I mean, that's definitely close enough. That's this line that I'm drawing to. It's closer to Easter Island than anything else on Earth once you clear Mexico anyway. And so that's pretty cool to see. Like Jupiter's at the midheaven, right? You're studying night sky. And literally in the moment of your birth in Arizona, if somehow I could see through the glare of the sun, because it's very much daytime, and feel where Jupiter is there in the south and held you up to Jupiter, I would be generally holding you in this direction. And since it's so bright, I'd probably miss a little bit and hold you right towards Easter Island. But we definitely know in Easter Island, like there's powerful astrocartography lines. Those aren't going to change. Like these local space lines I'm taking away, these are your Tucson local space lines. But this Paran, this crossing, which is dang close to Easter Island, this is where Jupiter was at the midheaven, right? So that's also true. We saw in Arizona, right? I can just follow that line north. The midheaven lines are always meridians, north-south lines. A little bit more on the New Mexico side. And Neptune's setting, right? So what an amazing place for Vision Quest. How long were you there?
1 or 2 weeks. I don't quite remember.
Was it absolutely magical?
Absolutely magical.
Cool. So this is the place, I just zoomed in way too fast, that the map also brought my eyes. I guess it is Fiji. I was thinking New Caledonia on this map was Fiji maybe. So this, wait a second. No, this is Fiji. Hold on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never been, always to go.
And I'm wondering what this is. So let's go northeast of Fiji. Maybe Kiribati?
Mm-hmm.
No, it's Samoa. Have you been?
Mm-hmm. No.
Go. So Samoa has moon setting. This is one of these other Parans. We saw one was in Cuba, right? In kind of Ecuador zone where the moon was at the IC while the sun was setting. And this is the one where the sun is at the midheaven while the moon is setting. So Sun, Mercury at the midheaven, again, that was called Fame Line. It's Pluto at the IC. So, I don't know that I would say go live there. But, this is a really important truth. And again, like this is the right place to end with our Scorpio eclipse coming up. Your Scorpio Pluto cohabiting with that Scorpio moon, right? That might actually, I think that's Pluto's setting. It must be. Yeah. In Mundo. So maybe tuning into Samoa, right? And we can travel without moving. So, getting onto the internet and tuning into a dance from Samoa, a chant, right? One of the great myths. Speaking to people that spent time there, whatever, I think maybe you'll hear a little magical whisper from this aligning total lunar eclipse for you from the tropics of Samoa. Time will tell. Thank you so much, Andi, for spending this much time with me and your willingness to go live, which I think just makes it more fun. And there's some really fun examples that came up, and thank you for your permission to share a couple little stories from your life. When I'm teaching astrocartography, when we're looking at famous people and what they did, it's super interesting. I think the maps are a little bit more telling than anything else in astrology in that way, because they just can be so literal. And, but when we're speaking to actual people who have actual stories that they are actually sharing from their actual selves, it matters so much more. So thank you for taking the time. It's really wonderful to see you and taking us to a few of your 100 countries. And we have a strange delay, so you will hear that sometime.
My pleasure. Thank you. Anytime.
Right on. All right. Be well. Good luck with your mission there in Dubai. And I hope to see you on Earth when stars align. Until then, see you in space.